JCPenney is getting booted from the S&P 500 index after losing more than half of its market value this year. S&P Dow Jones says the Plano, Texas-based retailer is being replaced by Allegion plc, a provider of security for homes and businesses. Penny's downward spiral started during an ill-fated transformation strategy under former CEO Ron Johnson. I'm Carlotta Bradley, AP Radio News.
I didn't hear the news. How many people got blown up today? How many politicians got arrested? I don't know. Oh, well, I'll find out by reading the paper tomorrow. This is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Progress 127, and we have two guests tonight, one at 6 and one at the 7 o'clock hour. I have no idea, XM listeners, what your status is. I don't know if you're listening to me right now. I don't know if you get bumped off, pardon the expression, at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, or maybe not at all. I don't know. But there is a lot of college football on, so some of the sports overflow may get you. The paper I read, the New York Times, has something they start every year right around the beginning of November, and it's called, The Neediest, or it's got some other title. It's called The Neediest, and they feature something in the main section where this is in the New York City section. They've got the world and then the national news, and then they've got state and city news. And the city news features this thing. It runs straight through, I think, Christmas. And it's called a plea for the neediest or the neediest. And they pick out people in New York City who are, were stricken by illnesses and lost their jobs or desperately poor for one reason or another. I mean, they're not picking people out where there was any, sense that they had any hand in their own demise, that they were, spent their life, getting arrested or, drifting from place to place or mentally ill. They just pick out people who, there could be somebody, some poor woman who's a single mother who was, whose husband died in some accident and who, that really needy people, but needy, righteous people, put it that way, if you can make a division. I mean, if somebody's needy, they're needy, but these are needy, righteous, needy people. And they raise, millions of dollars from readers, and they give this money to them. I'm presuming that there's no overhead like at a lot of charities. There are some charities that, where something like, there's a list that you can find. There's some website where you can find this list. There are certain charities where they rate them as to how much of the money that they get in actually goes to the purpose of the charity. So if it's, save the children or to eliminate AIDS or whatever it is, Red Cross or food support, that kind of thing. It's amazing. There's certain charities. Of course, you read articles in the paper constantly where there are people who are being indicted, usually politicians, state legislators, usually in most states. In New York State, it's always a state legislator, once in a while a city council person. And they have a charity, Help Brooklyn Survive or whatever it is. And they register this charity. And basically they find out after about 4 years of this charity receiving like $1,282,000 in federal and state money that their brother, Raymond, and their mother-in-law, who died 4 years ago, are the two people in charge of the charity. There's nobody sitting at the office, and all the money went straight to him paying off gambling debts or his girlfriend, the state legislator. This happens maybe once every 6 months in New York City. I mean, a lot, and I'm sure it happens in other places. Just picking New York because that's the place I live, so it's the place I know about. And so these people get indicted, and they, they say, the first thing their lawyer says, of course, is, my client is completely innocent. The facts will show, blah, 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 blah. And then, 6 months later, they're indicted, they're convicted of 32 counts of egregious fraud and whatever it is. My client, when the facts come out, my client will be completely vindicated. I'd like to do a little poll or statistical analysis of how many times that's been said out loud by a lawyer or a defendant, a high profile, like a state legislator or, like a rich person. What's the percentage of time that these people were convicted? 99% of the time? When the facts come out, so the worst thing that could happen to these people is the facts come out. And the facts do come out, and they all go to jail. So anyhow, so they have the I don't know what it is, the city's neediest, and people contribute to it, and things are harder and harder and harder and harder. It's worse and worse. And as one of our guests tonight later on is going to talk about something that happened in Washington, where a union rejected a gigantic corporation's offer, an offer to stay. This corporation this huge corporation, which you'll be very familiar with when we talk about it later, wanted to move out of a state, and it would destroy a huge portion of this state's economy. And they basically made a blackmail kind of offer to the big union that supports their work there, that does most of the work and builds what they manufacture. And basically, it was blackmail. They were saying, here's some dog shit, take it or leave it, and the union actually rejected it. So it's a whole big uproar going on out there about that. But what's basically, and somebody wrote an article on it, and the guy's going to come on tonight, basically how this is a further indication of destruction of the middle class, because these were very, very skilled workers. I should say are very, very skilled workers, and they make something like an average of $60,000 to $70,000 a year, which in this day and age in the United States just places you in the middle class. If you earn below, I don't know how people, whoever makes these ratings, I don't know how they do it, but I can tell you one thing. You can bet that the people who make these decisions and ratings and decide who's in the middle class and how much money it takes to be in the middle class are not in the middle class, or if they are, they're in the upper part of the middle class. These are people who are maybe PhDs, highly paid economists with think tanks, people like that make these ratings. People are making $100,000, $125,000 a year. So, John Paul Getty, who was one of the first billionaires, maybe the first billionaire statistically in the United States, Getty Oil, right? He once said in the 1950s, $1 billion doesn't go so far anymore. No, he said $1 billion isn't what it used to be. See, even John Paul had his problems, Mr. Getty. He said, quote unquote, $1 billion isn't what it used to be. But that's true. Don't you find that's true? Oh, how about you? $1 billion doesn't go to what it used to, right? Yeah. Okay. See, one yacht and you're baked. And I had that problem. $1 billion just isn't what it used to be. Point is that most of us who are making anywhere between, let's say, $35,000 or $40,000, and I don't know who's listening to me. Teachers listen to me. Truck drivers listen to me. Small business owners listen to me. Maybe a couple of people who have a lot of money listen to me. I mean, I think there's one or two politicians that actually listen to this show once in a while, and there's some lawyers that listen to me. There's some doctors that listen to me. But I think the average person, and a lot of people listening to me are, there's a lot of active service serving, like military people listen, retired veterans, people on Social Security, right? People on pensions. I think the average income, I'm just guessing, of somebody who listens to this show is probably $42,000. I'm just guessing, or $47,000 or $48,000, maybe $50,000. And we're talking about people who work hard or worked hard and now are living on pensions or Social Security. So I'm guessing about 90% of you know what I'm talking about, and the rest of you understand it well enough. But 90% of you, from sheer experience, from day-to-day experience, know how really hard it is to afford to live anymore. Car insurance, gas, electricity, home heating, oil or gas, propane if you buy it to heat your home. Basic services, something breaks and you have to replace it, the cost of an appliance or something that you really need, a refrigerator even, whatever it is, or a stove. Clothes, if you have kids and you have to buy clothes for your kids, or you have to buy your own clothes. Food that's through the roof. I mean, what food costs now, what it cost 5 years ago, must be double what it was 5 years ago, and it's going up all the time. Clothing is going up all the time. There isn't anything that isn't zooming up in terms of cost, and all of our income for the entire middle class, which let's say ranges anywhere from as low as 35 to 40,000. I don't know what the economists think middle class is, to maybe $120,000. That's the middle class right now. I mean, it's all inflation. When I was a kid, if you were making $25,000, you were firmly in the middle class, and anybody making $75,000 was considered upper middle class. But it's changed now. So there are people who make, a lot of people, there's two people working or two people receiving Social Security or IRA or pension benefits. So two people together might be making $50,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. It's just enough to get by. And, of course, it's different when you say get by, who you're talking about and what you're talking about. First of all, different places, it costs more to live. No place costs more than where I live in New York City. The cost of living, not the standard of living. The cost of living is higher in New York City than any place else in this country. What you might buy by walking into a supermarket is probably 30% higher than the same stuff or maybe the same brand, for all I know, that it costs if you live in somewhere in Idaho or Tennessee or Maine or something. So it's very expensive. But it doesn't matter where you live. Wherever you live, you know that the price of everything has gone way, way up, and your income has never kept pace with it. In the last 10 or 20 years, people's income has completely flattened out or gone down. I mean, the amount of benefits you get, contributions from employers, let's say to health insurance, the amount of vacation you get has not increased any. Sick time, personal time, all those kinds of things have stayed the same or been reduced. And most people's salary has been raised, 1% a year. Maybe every 2 years it's raised 2%, which is meaningless. Like if you get you understand what I'm talking about, right? All of you who are listening to me, let's say you have a contract. You work at a place, you're in a union, or you have a contract, or unless you get a personal raise, like you work for a place where you're not unionized, and you get a raise. And it's every year you get a 1% raise, or each 3 years of a contract. If you're in a union, every 3 years, let's say it's renegotiated, you get a 3% raise. During those 3 years, the cost of living went up 7% or 9% or 10%. So you have and it comes down to like this, the day-to-day way you live your life. You eat different food. You eat food that's not as tasty. You eat food maybe that's not quite as good as it could be. You ever try to buy organic food? Organic food is much better for you than all the pesticide, chemical-infused, GMO, bloated crap that most of us eat, because that's what we can afford to eat. And if you ate organic food, you would feel better and you would be healthier. And very often the food even tastes better. Now, most people cannot afford to buy organic food. It's just too expensive. And there are reasons for that, but that's a separate discussion. So, increasingly, you eat food which is less good than you eat like bulk amounts of food. You try to go to places where they sell huge portions of cartons of food for less money. You don't know what's in it. You don't know how well it's made, but that's what you eat. You might eat food that ordinarily doesn't really sustain you that well, doesn't have that many minerals and vitamins in it, but it's what you can afford to eat. Clothing. You don't get new clothes, right? Let's say you have a winter coat I'm trying to make this very prosaic because we all understand this, right? Let's say you have a winter coat that's 6, 7, 8, 9 years old or something. It's got, various worn spots in it. The elastic at the bottom doesn't work, so the cold air zips in and freezes all various parts of you. You can't get a new coat. The zipper doesn't work quite right, or it doesn't go all the way up. Good luck. You want a new coat? $150, $200 for a decent coat someplace. Your rent keeps going up because the landlords need to maintain their usually wealthy lifestyle. So, and the mortgages, look at the mortgages, right? Saying your rent keeps going up if you have an apartment all the time. People who are very wealthy or who are wealthy don't suffer. They do not suffer. They're already living at a very high standard of living. And they will not make any sacrifices. So it would be something out of Charles Dickens or Walt Disney for a landlord not to raise the rent as soon as they have a chance to do it. And often even when they're not supposed to do it, they will do it if they can get away with it. Huge corporations like Mobil Oil or whoever, they're going to keep raising the price of gas, or they're going to keep the price of gas high or artificially high, gasoline, because they make tens of billions of dollars in profit every year, don't pay tax, and pay their high executives and CEOs huge amounts of money. So the reason why so many things are so expensive all the time is not just because of scarcity. In some cases, it's true. There have been a lot of droughts. There have been a lot of demands on natural resources in other countries, which we've been sucking these natural resources out of for our own benefit for 100 years. And now these are, imagine this now, countries that actually grow cotton or grow certain kinds of food, they actually want to keep it for themselves. Can you imagine? Outrageous. That's why we need special forces and SEAL Team 12 to go in and shoot them all. So people all over the world are deciding that they don't want to work for slave wages and sell their natural resources, what they live on, maybe their food or other things that are worth money to them, like their own oil that's in their own ground. They don't want to sell it for outrageously low prices to the Americans. Bottom line is, because of natural disasters, because of climate change, because of other reasons, there are scarcities. So food, in fact, is more expensive in some cases in the United States because there's scarcities. Other times it's just expensive because a bunch of very, very wealthy assholes have been sitting in very well-furnished offices tinkering around with commodities futures. And so we all have to pay more money so that they can get even richer. But one of the main reasons, if it's not just scarcity, that things cost so much is because people who are very wealthy, the small group of people at the top of everything, at the top of the heap, and it is a heap life, the top of the heap, they want to stay rich and they want to get even richer. There's never enough money for the rich. They want to stay rich and they want to get richer. So they will keep charging you more and more money, even if it's artificially expensive, even if it doesn't cost that much. Something could even go down. The natural resources or the ability to make things that you buy, the expense of it could go down, but they're still going to charge you the same or more for the retail price so that they can maintain their lifestyle. And that's the way it goes. And that extends into politics and the way taxes work and the way politics work in the country. There are more and more loopholes all the time. The loopholes never get closed down for the rich. They have a very, very high tax rate. The highest tax rate in this country is 39%. I mean, it's absurd. It used to be up to 90 during Eisenhower's time, when in fact there was a very strong middle class and not that much poverty in the country. During the 1950s was maybe one of the lowest rates of poverty that this country has ever experienced in comparison to the rest of the population. And also that the middle class in this country was thriving. What is the middle class? Middle class, people in the middle, the vast bulk of people in the middle who pay most of the taxes and are sort of the iron backbone of a decent democratic society, has more or less been disappearing and is on the verge of being extinguished. Most of us who were considered middle class, and maybe still are in economists' dreams, have slipped into a kind of twilight state where we're headed towards lower class or lower middle to lower class. And many people who are in the lower middle class, at the bottom edge of the middle class, are now slipping into or have slipped into poverty. So you could be, for instance, a teacher starting out someplace, or let's say a fireman or cop, all very laudable professions if they're practiced right, especially, teaching and, firefighters. Let's say you start out as a nurse or whatever it is, right? Something like that. I'm just picking on professions that are something recognizable to all of us. You might start out at $35,000 or $40,000 or $41,000, depending on what city or what area you live in, or $29,000 if you're living in some real rural place where theoretically it's not so expensive to live. Can you imagine living on that? Who's listening to me right now who lives on $35,000 a year? But that is the starting salary for a lot of college graduates, even people with master's degrees, or trained people who are nurses, technicians, teachers, cops, firemen, sanitation workers will start out at that rate. And a lot of these people already are married or have one kid. Now, of course, two people have to work. In the 1950s, somehow, I lived in a neighborhood that was considered lower middle class. Who was there? Across the street was Nelson DeCop. Down the block was Mr. Douglas, who was a driver of a laundry truck for a very large, New York City laundry company. Picked up people's, diapers and laundry and others, and then brought it back clean, whatever it was, the next day. So there was a guy who drove a laundry delivery tech. Then there was a guy named Stan Green, who was a lot of these guys were veterans of World War II, and he had his own floor waxing company. He had a small van that he had bought with a bank loan, and he had his office in the basement of his house. And his wife took the calls, and made the arrangements. And he went out with floor waxing equipment, and he waxed people's floors, and that's how he got by. And all of these people had kids. Nelson, the cop, Douglas, the delivery guy, and Stan Green, the floor. He was my scoutmaster, by the way, when I was a Boy Scout. Yes, I was a Boy Scout. And no, I didn't learn all the foul language I know now from the Boy Scouts. I learned that someplace else. So these are the kind of people who lived in my neighborhood. Yeah, now, on the other side of the track, I lived on the wrong side of the tracks in my neighborhood. On the right side of the tracks were, lawyers and some guys who were, sort of upper middle executives in businesses, a couple of doctors. That was definitely the other side of the tracks. But mostly people live in my neighborhood. There was a guy who had a small plumbing business. He wasn't getting rich off it. That kind of thing, right? But everybody seemed to be okay. Everybody had a car. It was a used car. Maybe it was 2 years old, 3 years old, but it was in great shape, It was maintained. Everybody had a very small house, maybe a tiny backyard. And this is where, was this the American dream? I suppose it was, because all of these guys had lived through, they've been born in the 20s and 30s. They lived, actually born in the 20s, most of these guys. They lived through the horrible Depression. They lived in the inner city, and they lived through the Depression. They suffered. They starved. They had to drop out of school, some of them, to work when they were 16, never even finished high school. Then they get drafted into World War II and see horrors unimaginable. They get home, and what's their dream? Where they're lying there in some foxhole, and German artillery is breaking over their heads, smashing trees to pieces, and shell fragments are hitting their buddies, and they think they're going to go out of their minds. If they have a second to daydream, what are they daydreaming about? They're daydreaming about they're going to get home, and you have to pardon me, I have a sore throat. So, well, you don't have to pardon me, but I have a sore throat. Anyhow, so what are they daydreaming about? They spent their lives working since they're like teenagers. They were thrown out of, on the streets in a depression, had to get jobs before time they wanted to. They couldn't even finish school, some of them. They work hard. They work 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day. Some people had 2 jobs. Some people put themselves through school with tremendous willpower. My father worked during the day and put himself through school at night. It took him 7 years to finish City College in New York City. And people just didn't have money, right? But they knew what hard work meant, to say the least, and they knew what suffering meant and knew what deprivation meant. A lot of people just sunk and starved to death during the Depression. Tens of thousands of people actually died because they didn't have any heat in the winter and didn't have enough food. Tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people barely had houses to live in, often didn't have lights or electricity or heat or even enough food to live. They had 1 meal a day. And this is what happened, right? But then laws were passed in the 30s. People understood, is this what we really want? Is this the kind of country we want to live in? Is this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that they talked about in the Declaration of Independence? What life? Liberty to do what? Starve? The pursuit of happiness? Don't make me laugh. Don't make me fucking laugh, right? So people starved. The people got by finally. The government gets involved at the urging of people, right? Because it looks like they were on the verge of revolution in those days. And truly, if you read enough histories of the 30s, you see that there were millions of people, so many millions of people out of work, regular working people out of work, not just people who were whiners and drifters and sucking off, welfare queens. We're talking about workers who were out of work. There was no work for them to do, and there wasn't enough pay even when they did work to live, and especially to support their families. So people were restless. They were violent. There were hundreds of thousands of people living in what they called Hoover towns, in tent cities and in shacks and under railroad overpasses and bridges and on the edges of highways and, in beaten up old smashed buildings. And finally, the 30s come. And generally, it is understood, finally, it dawns on them, the revelation is, we don't want our brothers and sisters, our family, our mothers and fathers and children, we don't want other fellow Americans to live like that. It's just plain wrong. Especially, nobody should be so rich while everybody is so poor. That was something that goes back all the way to the Bible. It goes back that far. Jesus came for the poor. He did not come for the rich. It was understood now that one of the problems with Christianity was he came for the poor, and he wasn't an economist and he wasn't a political activist so much. So he didn't seem to be saying, I want all of you to work hard so you can be in the middle class. He just said, you're poor. You're always going to be poor. He said, the poor are always with us, right? He says, you're always going to be poor. There's always going to be rich people and there's going to be poor people, right? So just get used to it, but you don't have to feel so bad spiritually if you're poor. Well, I don't agree with that. And apparently a lot of people in the 1930s in the United States didn't agree with it either. And we passed laws, humane laws. We raised the level of the income tax so that very rich people couldn't just stay rich and get richer all the time off the backs of other people, that they weren't literally almost eating other people. They were so rich, which is what you look around and you see now. So we understood that. So the rich had to pay more. And they still stayed, wealthy, but they had to pay more than they used to. Or maybe they weren't as wealthy, but still they were very well off. And we had programs for people. We couldn't let people just starve to death. If workers wanted to work, we found work for them to do while we built up the whole country for each other. It was a commonwealth. You know what I mean? We built roads. We built post offices. Tens of thousands of workers were hired who were idle and had no money for themselves or their family, and they were given decent enough jobs building a vast number of post offices. In the 30s, there were thousands of post offices put up in this country by the Works Progress Administration. Building, materials were bought by the government. Construction companies got money from the government. The government got heavily involved and saved the United States. It saved the middle class. And it reinforced the concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all of us, that we're all in the same boat. It's a commonwealth of people. Okay, we all understood that. And this persevered all the way and even got better. There was Social Security. People said, well, when you get old, you shouldn't have to just starve. You shouldn't just have to be able to live on money, so little money that you don't have medical care, you die early, you suffer, you don't have enough to eat, you don't have any heat. People thought, well, you work all your life, we'll put this money away for you, it's your money, and we give it back to you. Maybe that deducted a little bit from families helping, but the whole point was that families had nothing to give old people. Remember, you have to think about what it was like in the 30s. And one of the reasons they passed Social Security was older people were dying because they're more fragile, right? Children and older people. Because what little people had, what that was available in the Depression, was stretched to its thinnest amount, and older people died off. And when people couldn't work anymore, too old, too sick, and they couldn't work anymore, they were in really bad shape, and their families couldn't even afford to support them. So Social Security, right, was instigated, and so there we have it. We have a society where we all cared about each other and we all thought about each other. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're all in this together, and that's how it works. Rich people were taxed the way they should have been, and this worked all the way through to the 50s, even the 60s, up into the 70s, and then things started to change. Why they changed, I suppose that's a long story. And there's no holy, and I mean that H-O-L-Y, there's no sacred or sacrosanct or holy group of people. The unions that were so important and so essential to the well-being of the middle class and to most people in this country, and that saved people's lives and got them decent jobs and decent working conditions, so they weren't working 7 days a week, and the children weren't working and weren't beaten by supervisors or fired at somebody's whim. And they had rights. They could work in decent working conditions. They could get raises, if the company was making a lot of money. People understood this. That's the way we should all help each other. It shouldn't be just a bunch of, a small group of people very rich and the rest of us very poor, which is happening right now. And then it gets to be the 50s, and in the 50s was the height of all this, the height of the unions, the height of the middle class, and the income tax for wealthy people, or whatever it was, if you made over $1 million or $500,000 or something, was like 90%. And then after it lasted until the 60s and 70s, unions, the Holy Union, they start to get corrupt. They started stealing from their own workers. The heads of unions were making too much money, and often still are. So the unions got corrupt, and they, and they were taken over, a lot of them, by the mob, and they were pushing people around. They were going so far as to make companies regret the fact that they even were in business because they were demanding so much money. This was infrequent, I'd say, but it was happening, right? So everybody goes too far sometimes. So this is what happened. And then there's a big turnaround in the 70s and 80s, and then we wind up what we have now. What we're going to do is take a break here and come back and talk a little bit about the way things are now. And Thanksgiving is upon us, right? That's why we have this, the neediest cases in the Times. Now it's cold. You look around, you see people. There's an article in the paper here the other day that the the tally of the homeless in New York City has gone up 13% in the last couple of months. While at the same time, by the way, several new buildings are being built in Manhattan at the cost of billions of dollars, where each one of these apartments is one apartment per floor. 60, 70, 80 floor buildings are being built in Manhattan, while people are actually increasingly out in the cold, starving and suffering, and have nowhere to live with their children. There are more and more and more buildings being put up all over Manhattan, dozens actually, if you look all over the city, where the average cost of an apartment, people buy them like houses, is $40 million. And these are places that people don't even live in all year round. These are places that people buy so that when they come back from their other houses and mansions in other countries, or visit from where they live, from China or Russia, they have a nice little place to stay in New York for $40 million. While thousands of other people are living on the street or don't even have enough money to exist in a shelter. So we're going to come back after the break, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, and then we'll take your calls about what it means. Thanksgiving's coming up.
Hi, this is Michelangelo Signorelli, and you're on SiriusXM Progress 127, where we don't just talk, we do.
And this is the Mike Feder Show, where we don't do anything, we just talk. That's the motto of this show. Here's an article from the paper yesterday. Extension of benefits for jobless is set to end. Little sign that Congress will act in time. Well, there's a shock. Unless Congress acts during the last week of December, that's this December, an estimated 1.3 million people. Let me read that again. Unless Congress, by the way, Congress is meeting for 4 days in December. For one reason or another, these people who get paid an average of $160,000 a year with perks, and have huge staffs and get all kinds of benefits and have terrific health care, by the way. These people, our representatives, are meeting for 4 days in December, okay? Unless Congress acts during the last week of December, an estimated 1.3 million people will lose access to an emergency program providing them with additional weeks of jobless benefits. A further 850,000 people will be denied benefits in the first quarter of 2014. We are talking about over 2 million more people who will have no money at all. How are these people supposed to live? How are they supposed to pay rent, attempt to pay a mortgage, buy food or clothes in the middle of the winter for their kids, let alone pay car insurance or buy gas or anything? What are they supposed to do? Just die? Okay. The other day in the newspaper was an article about it was auction season in New York. They have gigantic auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's. The other day, an Andy Warhol painting in the mid-'60s. Andy Warhol. You know Andy Warhol is the guy who got famous for painting Campbell's soup cans and Coke bottles and silk screens of Marilyn Monroe. Basically, he was a cartoonist, kind of a middling, technically proficient, poor artist. Not much to him. Basically, the Emperor's New Clothes, right? Not a really seriously moving creative artist. Kind of, and he was very good at publicity and popularizing himself. And he made his stuff was like very good cartoons, like kind of making political commentary or cultural commentary. Not much of an artist. In the mid-'60s, this guy Andy Warhol painted a very famous painting. It was the image of, he painted one thing. He painted a Campbell's soup can. That's it. He took a Campbell's soup can, I think it was tomato soup, and just painted it exactly the way it looked. It didn't have anything surreal about it, deep. It wasn't complex. It wasn't making any great commentary on American culture that anybody could detect. It was just a Campbell's soup can. But it was odd and perverse and unique, and nobody had ever done it before. And he got to be very famous doing this. One of the things he painted in the mid-'60s on a large canvas was a black and white image of a Coke bottle. That's all. Just a Coca-Cola bottle. It looked like it was empty, didn't have anything in it. That's all it was. If in the 6th grade you could sketch something like this, I'm sure a million people have. But that's what he did. He got famous, and he painted a Coke bottle. That was in the mid-'60s. Last Tuesday, somebody at an auction paid $50 million to buy this painting of a Coke bottle. Okay? Now, I could tell you it was anonymous, but I can tell you, I'll reveal now for the first time on the radio, that was not me. I did not buy it. And you know what? I'm guessing it wasn't you. Basically, we live in a country now, within 2 or 3 months or 4 months, 2 million more people will be out of work and have, who are already out of work, will have no money whatsoever in the middle of the winter to support themselves or their family. And we have a guy, so somebody was able to pay $50 million for a Coke, for the painting of a Coke bottle by a poor artist. And there are people in New York City who are snatching up $50, $60, $70, and $80 million apartments that are being built in gigantic apartment towers, while other people are out on the street and actually dying in some cases of partial malnutrition. There's some other things that would be interesting around this time of the year for you to know and for us to consider as a country, right? The average McDonald's worker, who could be there for many years, makes $8.25 an hour. $8.25 an hour. If you were full-time and you worked there, you'd be making something like, let's see, 40. You'd be making something like $320 a week. Multiply that by 50. So you work all day long, standing up, by the way. Those jobs, you don't sit down at those jobs. You stand up in front of some hot fryer, which smells like shit because you're cooking shit. And it's like 100 degrees in there, no matter what the temperature is outside, despite the air conditioning. You're on your feet all day long, or you're dealing with customers, and you're cooking this stuff in this grease, or you're putting together patties together, or whatever it is, or your job is to pump lard into the McBurgers. You know, you got some job there. $8.25 an hour. You're working hard for that, and you make $15,000, $16,000, $18,000 a year. That's poverty level. Now, McDonald's, which is based in Oak Brook, Illinois, that's where its headquarters are, they have a chief executive officer named William Thompson. You know what he was paid last year? $13.8 million. I don't think that he stood on his feet all day and fried burgers and fries. He got $13.8 million. The McDonald's Corporation got $5.6 billion in profits. They made $5.6 billion in profits. One of the things that McDonald's bought just last month, they ordered a new $35 million luxury jet for its top executives to add to its already 15 jet luxury jet fleet. They had to buy a new jet. The jet they bought is called, in the brochure it says, a luxurious Bombardier 605. Let's see. It says you can listen to Beethoven on the dual Blu-ray disc player or watch a movie on either of the two 22-inch HD monitors. It's a real pleasure. I guess it is. So now McDonald's recently acknowledging the fact internally in their own company that people, don't even earn enough money, that almost everybody who works there is basically at poverty level. They are paying almost starvation wages to these people, right? And so more than half of the 1 million employees at McDonald's, more than half of these people, something like 2/3 of them, are also getting food stamps and other public assistance. In other words, you and I, with what little we have that's left over from working hard that we can hardly afford to get by, we live paycheck to paycheck sometimes too in our own way, and we're not living luxurious lives. You and I, part of our taxes that are taken out of our check goes to pay several 100,000 McDonald's workers, because McDonald's won't pay them a living wage, but they pay their CEO $13.8 million, and they can afford to buy a $35 million luxury jet. But recently, they dressed up some asshole as Ronald McDonald, whoever is this clown, Ronald McDonald. You've seen him with the big flippy feet and his red wig and whatever it is. And I think he's, I think he's biracial or bisexual or whatever he is. Anyway, Ronald McDonald, the clown, right? They dress him up, and they put up a notice in all the McDonald's stores. They put up a notice, and it gave the McDonald's people, the people who work at McDonald's, who work the fryers and the people who work the cashiers, cash registers, it gave them ways to cope with their lives. The McDonald's people, in some sort of bizarre, vague recognition that they were starving people or paying people like slaves, actually put up a bunch of tips for McDonald's employees, and they posted this in the back room where only McDonald's employees would see it. And it has a picture of Ronald McDonald, and he's smiling, and he's pointing to these different tips. This is a real thing they put up in McDonald's stores, and it says, number one is, stressed out? Take a vacation. Here's a tip from the McDonald's Corporation to its own employees. At least 2 vacations a year can cut heart attack risk by 50%. That's what they're advising their workers. They're supposed to be able to take 2 vacations a year. It says 2 vacations a year can cut heart attack risk by 50%. They could also stop eating at McDonald's. I mean, that would cut your heart attack risk by about 100%. Also, it said, if vacation is not an option, you could sing a song. This is what it says on the notice that they put up at all the McDonald's stores. Singing along with your favorite songs can lower your blood pressure. Okay, here's another one. Another tip if you work at McDonald's and things are hard for you because you're getting $8.25 an hour. Breaking food into smaller pieces results in eating less but still feeling full. There's a good one. And how about this? If things are really tough for you because you're only making $8.25 an hour, while Mr. Thompson is making $13.8 billion or million, you may also consider returning some of your unopened purchases that may not seem as appealing as they did. This is around Christmas. Selling some of your unwanted possessions on eBay or Craigslist will bring in extra cash. And the final tip for people who work at McDonald's is stress hormones rise 15% after complaining. In other words, don't complain. Shut up, stand there, take the $8.25 an hour for frying this shit to people, and eating this and stuffing people full of this garbage while people are getting rich at the top of the corporation and buying jets. If you're under stress because of this, you should just stop being under stress because it's bad for your body. And complaining is the worst thing you can do. So stop complaining. Walmart just announced, by the way, that it will open its stores at 6 p.m. this Thanksgiving, thus destroying everybody who works at Walmart's Thanksgiving with their family. They will have to rearrange, or in some cases actually cancel their Thanksgiving plans that they may have had with their families because the store is opening at 6 p.m. And let's see, Walmart Chief Marketing Officer Duncan McNaughton said Monday, We thought that 6 o'clock was the exact right time to win the weekend. And this is what this guy said. His name is Duncan McNaughton, and he's the chief marketing officer at McDonald's. Now, this is a guy who should burn in hell, right? This is what he says. He explained that the 1 million workers need to staff the stores are really excited to work that day. Can you imagine? He's saying that these Walmart workers are really excited to work that day. So they're going to do that. And now, since the people at Walmart's make an average of $12 an hour, and that's after working there several years, they make an average of $12 an hour, but more than half of the workers there are not allowed to work full time, so they don't even pay out that much money, so each worker doesn't make that much money. The average Walmart worker earns about $18,000 or $19,000 a year. They're in poverty. There are 1.8 million Walmart workers also who work on their knees with knee pads, on the floor, loading and, unloading pallets, cleaning out trucks, delivery trucks, standing on their feet all day long, working at the cash register, very few breaks. They're treated like shit by their bosses. And recently, the National Labor Relations Board is said that it's going after Walmart's for for threatening people who wanted to form a union at Walmart's, where they don't pay people enough to even live. And so more than half of the 1.8 million Walmart employees are getting food stamps. This is federal and state welfare, right? Food stamps and other forms of public assistance. Again, your tax money and my tax money is going to pay these people. Basically, Walmart's and McDonald's, and the chief of Walmart's, by the way, the CEO of Walmart, makes $20.7 million a year. The CEO of Walmart makes more in 1 hour than a Walmart worker working all day long, every week of the year practically, makes in a year. In 1 hour, he makes more than a Walmart worker works in a year. And the other day, Walmart put huge bins in all of its stores, its 1,000+ stores, and it asked its workers to donate food to its needy employees. Walmart's new idea is this: launch a food drive for its own employees. Let's see. The Cleveland Plain Dealer newspaper first reported on the story, and now it's picked up by a number of outlets, including the Business Insider. There are big bins in all the Walmart stores that say, please donate food items here so associates in need can enjoy Thanksgiving dinner. I guess they understand that what they're paying out is not enough to keep people out of poverty. And the Walton family, there are five Walton family, five of them. There are five of them: Alice Walton, Rob Walton, and a couple others. And there's one of them is married to one of the Waltons. These five people have assets and cash and money and stock that adds up to $141 billion. These five people, have as much cash and assets and property as the bottom 42% of all of American people. These five people have as much or more than 140 million other Americans, right? And they receive close to $1 billion in dividend income. They own 50% of the Walmart Corporation. These five people receive close to $1 billion just in dividend income. Walmart made $15.7 billion in profit last year, and it's putting bins in its stores so that other people who work there, there's a 70% turnover, by the way, at Walmart's. Other people who work there can give food to other people there so they can have food for their Thanksgiving and Christmas for their families. And I could go on, but I've gone on enough. Is this the country that we had a revolution to fight? Is this what life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is about? Is this why we fought a civil war in this country? Is this why hundreds of thousands of men died fighting fascism, the Nazis and the Japanese Empire in World War II, to preserve what? Is this the way that we want our country to be? It seems to me that voting doesn't make any difference anymore. You're wasting your time if you vote. I think it's time for a revolution. And a revolution can happen in many ways. It could be vast civil disobedience. It could be massive strikes. And it could be an actual revolution. Now, a revolution is no light thing. It says in the Declaration of Independence, you don't do these things, without thinking about it. What you do is you try every way you can, every reasonable, logical, nonviolent way you can to convince people to do the right thing. If they don't, then you have no choice. I'm thinking that we're near the place where we have no choice. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you got to ask yourself, life, what kind of life? Really, what kind of life are we living? What kind of life do we want to live? Liberty? Liberty to do what? To starve? The pursuit of happiness? The pursuit of whose happiness? What kind of country do we want? What kind of country do we have? Where are we going? Pulling a lever, pushing a button, putting a piece of paper in every 2 years or 4 years is not going to change anything. If things don't change, and it's up to us to change them, we are at the point of revolution. So I say, have a good Thanksgiving, and I will be back here talking to you after the 6 o'clock hour with somebody who's just written an interesting book about the post office.
I wanna be a billionaire so fucking bad. Buy all of the things I never had. I wanna be on the cover of Forbes magazine, smiling next to Oprah and the Queen. Oh, every time I close my eyes, I see my name in shiny lights. Yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire. Yeah, I would have this. The best things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I need fun. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want.
I'm Carlotta Bradley, AP Radio News.
Jesus, the news is so goddamn stupid. I mean, what can you say in 3 minutes that means anything? They interview a guy, they got snowstorms all over the country that are starting, and there's some already happening in the Midwest that have actually killed people, older people, people who got caught in houses or in cars, that have stopped traffic, that have stopped city services. Who's the first person they interview? There's some idiot in California who's looking forward to snowboarding. Why is the news so stupid? I don't know. Is there a Santa Claus? A lot of things I don't know. All right, this is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Progress 127. We're going to talk to somebody who has written a new book about the United States Post Office and the false chasm that it says that it's fallen into, and that we're all going to have to watch the post office be privatized. And also, he's written he's focused in on Senator Dianne Feinstein and her, basically what he calls her family business. The book is called Going Postal, and the author is Peter Byrne, Byrne. What's the full title of the book, Peter?
Going Postal, U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband sells post offices to his friends cheap.
That's putting it pretty clearly. Peter, by the way, is a national award-winning investigative reporter and science writer based in Northern California. And you have a website, right?
I do. It's just peterbyrne.info.
Okay, Going Postal, and the book is available even as we speak, right? If people went to Amazon, they could get it?
Yeah, just go to Amazon, put in Going Postal and my name or Feinstein, and it'll pop up. There's a couple other Going Postal books, it turns out. It's kind of popular, but mine's at the newest one.
Okay, and it is about basically the privatization of the post office, right?
Yeah, it's, a lot of people around the country are waking up and finding out that their local post office has been turned into a restaurant or a boutique, and there's nothing they can do about it. And so in that sense, a lot of the postal real estate is being sold off and transformed into non-public purposes. And it's annoying a lot of people, especially people that like to use the U.S. mail, which is, still viable.
Mm-hmm. But when you're focusing in on, and we're talking about, I think it's like thousands of properties, parking lots, garages, and actual post offices, right?
Right. We're talking about everything from post offices in downtown areas that have historic WPA-type murals to parking lots in rural areas. And
the what is the, before we get to what is really the most sordid part of it, is that Dianne Feinstein's husband, who is part of a gigantic real estate firm, is exclusively in charge of selling off these post offices. And we're going to focus in on this stuff. I mean, the investigation you did here is really quite thorough and really amazing. Why it doesn't result in indictments is amazing to me too. But Well, before we get right down to this, what is the reason why the post office says that it's selling off all these properties?
Well, in 2006, Congress passed a law, largely at the urging of Representative Darrell Issa of California, but it was bipartisan, and it passed shortly before midnight, right before Christmas. And it basically said that the post office has to prepay 75 years worth of retirement health care benefits in 10 years. That means that the post office has to prepay $55 billion worth of retirement benefits in 10 years, which means that it automatically was hit with an annual bill of $5.5 billion. Now, there's no other government agency, and indeed no private business in the world, that has to do this sort of thing. I mean, who's ever heard of prepaying 75 years worth of retirement benefits? And the irony of it is that the post office actually has prepaid about $80 billion in benefits, so it was a complete red herring. What it did, however, was it immediately put the post office from being a profitable institution to deeply in the red, and this gave an excuse to various political forces that represent various business interests to say that the post office is inefficient, it's broke, and that it needs to sell off its jewels, its family, its prime assets, and taken over by the private sector. So it's a politically created canard.
Well, now, since this is so obvious, and there's no other business or public agency that has ever done anything like this or would do anything like it because it would break them and ruin them, since it's so obvious that this is a political move so that private corporations can take over the post office, has not anybody investigated this or looked into it to see if there was some, intent to do this, or are we just assuming that this is politics as usual?
Actually, there's a website called Save the Post Office, which is run by a professor of English at NYU, at New York University. And he, for the last couple of years, has been the only institution that's been reporting on this massive boondoggle at all. It's very interesting. If you Google Save the Post Office, it'll come right up. But aside from that, the so-called news media, every time that there's a story about the post office, just recycles this insane claim by the Postal Service that it's broke and therefore it has to sell off its assets. And reporters just pick up that mantra and repeat it article after article, time and time again, because they're just scribes. They're just not interested in actually doing any reporting anymore for various reasons. However, I did get interested in it, and because I've reported on the Feinstein and her husband Richard Blum, their family business interests that intersect with her political actions as a powerful member of the United States Senate. I've reported on this several times over the last 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
It fell to my lot to look into this particular contract that the senator's family has to sell off portions of the post office's real estate portfolio, which is valued at $85 billion. That's what it'd be. And I worked on it off and on for about a year, and it was funded by the William James Association in Santa Cruz, California, so I was able to actually do this. And what I first did was I put in some freedom of information requests for the post office for the contract and the invoices and things like that. And what I found was that, one, they didn't want to give me very much, so I had to protest and appeal and all that. But eventually I did get the contracts and stuff. And essentially, the title of my book completely sums up what I found. U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband sells post offices to his friends cheap.
But isn't that... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Prove it. And I can prove it.
Okay, so let's go over that, because in fact, from what little I understand, I'm not a lawyer. I play one on the radio, but I'm not a lawyer. That seems to me to be illegal. So let me go over this with you point by point. The paragraph here, and this is excerpted from an article that you wrote for Alternet, which is based on your book. It says here, political reasons, et cetera, et cetera. There was an exclusive contract to negotiate sales for the Postal Service's $85 billion real estate portfolio given to C.B. Richard Ellis, CBRE. And that is the corporation. That's was that an international real estate corporation?
Yes, the largest commercial real estate firm in the entire world.
Okay. And that corporation is chaired by Richard C. Blum, who is the husband of U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein of California. Right away, it's wrong. Let me just continue with your. All right. The corporation's connection to a politically powerful family with a history of accessing public pension funds to make private investments has caused more than a few activists to suspect wrongdoing. You're a good journalist, man. To suspect wrongdoing, even though no evidence of any conflicts of interest tied to CBRE contract has been revealed, and you write, until now. Okay, first let me ask you, it says here, a powerful family with a history of accessing public pension funds to make private investments. What does that mean?
Oh, it's amazing. Mr. Blum has a banking firm, an investment banking firm called Blum Capital Partners, which is the foundation of his financial empire, which I humorously labeled the Blumpire.
Yeah.
And it's been based over the last 30 years, ever since he married Dianne Feinstein, who was at that time the mayor of San Francisco, and then went on to become one of the senior U.S. senator right now, and the chairperson of the so-called Intelligence Committee. His businesses basically have accessed public funds for the last 30 years and leveraged them for private profit. He's got an inside door into the California Public Employees Pension Fund, CalPERS, the California Teachers Pension Fund, pension funds all over the country, in fact. And his businesses have had contracts with the federal government ranging from manufacturing munitions and other military equipment for our youth in Iraq and Afghanistan, to constructing the Big Dig tunnel in Boston, which you may be familiar with, which is rife with numerous problems and vastly over budget. That was a deal which a company that Mr. Blum owned and operated, Perini Corporation, was involved in.
But he could do all this without. I mean, you're not saying that there's no proof that his wife, who's one of the most powerful people in the entire country, called somebody up and said, "You better give this to Richard," or "Why don't you give this to Richard?"
Oh, actually, in 2007, I published an expose of the war contracts that Mr. Blum's companies had. One was Perini Corporation, one was URS Corporation, which he's since divested of, but he was owned and operated them basically at the time that Dianne Feinstein was the chair of the Military Construction Subcommittee of the Senate Appropriations Committee. And I was able to show, using the public record, that her subcommittee approved time and time again contracts that were awarded to her husband's company.
Oh, wait. Let me see if I want to hear this again. She was in charge of this committee, which basically approved the awarding of contracts, military contracts, right? And
right, military contracts.
And one of the bidders for these contracts, while she approved this, was her husband's company.
And not only a bidder, but the contracts would periodically come up for renewal, and they would just flow through the subcommittee that she chaired for vetting, and they would be approved. And more than that, I quite remarkably obtained an interview with a man named Michael Klein, who is a longtime attorney associated with Feinstein and Blum, and who was also on the board of directors of Perini Corporation, one of these military industrial corporations that Blum was running. And he told me that, and we printed this, that he regularly gives Senator Feinstein lists of contracts that Perini Corporation has that are before her committee so that she could recuse herself from voting on them. However, I was able to show that she had never, ever, not even once recused herself from voting on them.
Really?
And that, in fact, what he was doing was giving her a wish list of stuff that he wanted to see happen.
Well, let me ask you, we have more to talk about here. Why aren't they in jail?
Well, because they run the government. I mean, who's going to?
I'm sorry. I had to ask just for form's sake. Okay, let's move on. That's not really.
Well, let me just say something, Mike. If you look at my book, there's a photograph of Mr. Obama's inauguration in 2008, and on his right is Richard Blum, and on his left is Dianne Feinstein. What U.S. attorney in his right mind is going to bring an indictment against those two? And also because we're talking about the post office now. This is a blueprint for indicting post office officials more than anything else.
All right, we'll get to that. Okay, so here, your investigation, Peter Byrne, we're talking to Byrne, and the book is Going Postal. His year-long investigation has uncovered evidence of multiple conflicts of interest, etc. CBRE, the real estate company, appears to have repeatedly violated its contractual duty to sell postal properties at or above fair market value. We can explain that in a minute. They have sold valuable postal properties to developers at prices that appear to have been steeply discounted from fair market values, resulting in a loss of tens of millions of dollars in public revenue. And in a series of apparently non-arm's length transactions, CBRE negotiated the sale of postal properties all around the country to its own clients and business partners, including one of its corporate owners, Goldman Sachs Group. And last one is, and then you can tell us more about this. CBRE has paid commissions as high as 6% has been paid commissions as high as 6% by the Postal Service for representing both the seller and the buyer in many of the negotiations, thereby raising serious questions, yes, I'd say so, as to whether CBRE was doing its best to obtain the highest price possible for the Postal Service. And Senator Feinstein has lobbied the Postmaster General on behalf of a redevelopment project in which her husband's company was involved. So first question is, or first, opportunity to enhance something you said is contractual duty to sell postal properties at or above fair market value. That's pretty clear. You say that Richard Blum and his company have sold these extremely valuable properties to developers at steeply discounted values, resulting in a loss of tens of millions. Why would somebody do a thing like that? Wouldn't they get less commissions? Why would they do a thing like that?
Because it has nothing to do with the commissions. The commissions are chump change. We're talking about real estate, one of the largest real estate firms in the world. It has real estate offices in towns big and small all across America. It's all about the art of the deal, okay? And the commission doesn't really, it's a nice little piece of change, I'm sure, but that's not the significant thing. The significant thing is, one, the CBRE has been representing both the buyer and the seller being the post office, the buyer being, in many instances, its clients and business partners.
So they get would they get a commission from both sides?
They get a commission from both sides that amounts up to 6%. But here's the thing. It's not the money that's important in that issue. What's important is that the reason that the buyer has a real estate agent that is not the same as the seller is because agents are supposed to represent the interests of their clients in a negotiation. Mm-hmm. So it's insane to have one agent representing the interests of both of them, because the duty of the agent for the buyer is to get the lowest price, and the duty of the agent for the seller is to get the highest price. Now, if one real estate agent is representing both the buyer and the seller, one of those two, the buyer or the seller, is going to get the raw end of the stick. And I can tell you that in this case, it was always the post office who got the raw end of the stick.
Well, now, if they're the seller, and it's to their interest to have, obviously, to get the highest possible price, and clearly they could have gotten and still could get much higher prices for these properties, which are going to be turned into condos or God knows what, Coach Leather or McDonald's or who knows what. Why has not the post office found somebody else to do the job if he is undercutting them by tens of millions of dollars? What happened in the post office? Who's responsible for that?
Well, first of all, the post office gave CBRE, Mr. Blum's firm, a exclusive contract to handle all the sales and leasing. Was there
bidding? Was there bidding on the contract?
There was some invited bidding, but the post office refused to release the bid sheets or to tell me the criteria by which CBRE was selected. However, it was not on the basis of price. It was clearly a subjective criteria where somebody just decided to select CBRE. There was no other reason for doing it than what their feelings were about it. But will not disclose what those feelings were. I did get the contract that they signed with CBRE, and it does say that CBRE must obtain fair market value for these properties, and it is not allowed to sell them below fair market value. Now, the interesting thing is that the contract also allows CBRE to appraise the properties itself. Normally, in a real estate transaction, it's not the realtors that appraise the property. It's not the client. It's an independent third party, an appraiser that appraises the property.
Well, like who, for instance?
We'll go from there.
Well, who are these appraisers? Are they private companies or state organizations or what?
Well, it could be either, but if you've ever bought or sold a building or a house, you'll find that, you have an agent that represents your interest. The buyer or the seller, depending on where you are at, has an agent representing their interest.
Mm-hmm.
And an independent party not associated with either agent comes in and says, well, this house is worth $400,000
mm-hmm.
because, there's ways that they appraise properties, which we don't need to go into at the moment. But it's supposed to be independent. So in this case, the contract allowed CBRE not only to represent both the buyer and the seller, but to decide what the fair market value was. And when I asked for, under the Freedom of Information Act, for the documents showing what the fair market value was of the 52 properties that I was able to determine that they sold in the first year and a half of the contract, the Postal Service's lawyers told me that it was commercially sensitive information equivalent to a national security secret, and they didn't have to give it to me.
What? That this information about the sale of the post office is equivalent to a national security secret?
Quote, unquote. This was an attorney at L'Enfant Plaza headquarters in Washington, D.C., named Jeffrey Meadows, who told me that. And they utterly refused, basically defying me to sue them, to give me the appraisals that CBRE had made for the properties that it sold. So I wanted to find out what the value of these properties were. And
mm-hmm.
the way I did it was I went online or by telephone, took quite a long time, to the assessors responsible for assessing the value of every single one of these properties in 52 counties across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And what people need to understand is that, an assessed value is generally based on the value, the price that a property, whether it's commercial or residential, the price that it got the last time it was sold.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was sold last year for $100,000 or, 20 years ago for $100,000, it will be more or less assessed still at $100,000, give or take, a few little increments and things like that. Although,
right.
So the assessed value is in almost every case going to be lower than the fair market value of a property, especially because during a downturn, which is what we experienced a few years ago in the
mm-hmm.
real estate market, assessed values are almost unilaterally lowered to reflect the lowering of overall value.
Well, couldn't Mr. Blum say the reason I had to sell them at a lower price is because we're going through a downturn?
Well, he could say that, except for the downturn was over by 2011 by the time that he got the contract. And as I show in my book, there's a nice chart from Moody's showing that real estate commercial property prices and the values of them, especially of the types that these post offices were being sold to in terms of development plans, had almost come back to their 2006 overinflated values. So basically, inner city real estate
mm-hmm.
has come back full blown to what it was at the height of the market right before the crash. And most of these properties that Blum sold were inner city.
Here's you mentioned in the article here property in Seattle. Maybe you could describe that.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. That was a very nice office building in downtown Seattle near the seafront in the Queen Anne district, a very Tony exclusive district.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the time of sale, I think in 2012, it was assessed at a value of $16 million by the local county assessor, which does not mean that that's the fair market value. The fair market value could be $40 million for all we know. But what we can pretty much be sure of is that it's not less than $16 million.
Mm-hmm.
What did CBRE sell the property for? $8 million, half the assessed value of the property.
And do you know who they sold it to?
Yeah, I actually talked to the gentleman. He's a doctor, and said he was shocked that he got such a great deal. And then what happened was that CBRE turned around and negotiated a deal where the post office that had been in the building leased back the first floor of the building so it could stay there. And, first of all, it's a violation of CBRE's contract to do that because it explicitly forbids them from representing a client that wants to lease back a property that they've just sold.
Mm-hmm.
But worse than that, what's happening all over the country with these sales is that the post offices are being sold, and then the Postal Service is being forced to lease back those same properties that it just owned at exorbitant leases generally so that it can keep operating, or it's forced to go down the street and lease a new property, which is generally much more expensive. So it's being booted out of real estate that it had in many cases for decades, and forced to enter the market and find new digs for itself, while these properties are being sold undervalued. Now, one of the most remarkable ones was in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Eugene McCarthy Postal Building, a 17-story skyscraper in a redevelopment area that was, pretty valuable. Had been assessed in 2009 at $25.5 million. That means that it was assessed value was $25 million, which, again, its fair market value could have been $50 or $100 million for all we know, because if an appraisal was done by CBRE, they won't make that public.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was done according to standard appraisal methods, it would certainly have had to have been substantially higher than $25 million. Mike, guess how much they sold that property for? $5 million.
But why would they do that unless they sold it at $5 million to someone who was their own client or somebody who they knew, or they were getting a kickback or something like that? Why would they do a thing like that? There's no motive for that because they would get less of a commission. And
because it's not about the commission. It's the art of the deal. That particular transaction was done by the local CBRE office in St. Paul.
Yeah.
And who knows, what kind of, how real estate agents are not exactly known for their great, ethical gravitas.
Well, that's true.
And they're always scratching each other's back and, doing this and that.
So in other words, a lot of people made a lot of money except the post office.
Yeah. And in that particular case, in St. Paul, it was sold to a group called the Exeter Realty Group. I have no idea if Exeter Group is owned by the brother-in-law of the local CBRE agent or not, and I don't care, because I was able to show that 20% of the sales were sold undervalued to actual CBRE clients and to their own to partnerships in which CBRE was involved. And
astounding.
The Boston example is probably the most egregious of all.
Mm-hmm. Well, describe the Boston one then.
Well, in Boston, there's an area called the Seaport District, which is about 1,000 acres of old railroad and toxic waste-heavy land that's being redeveloped into, and has been redeveloped into, a very Tony neighborhood with a convention center and hotels and stuff like that. And a lot of offices and residential buildings are being built there. It's a revitalization of that area of downtown Boston. And the partnership that controls the redevelopment of one area of that, of several hundred acres, called the Channel Center, is CBRE is a member of the partnership. It's a number of different groups, financial groups are running. It's called One Channel Center Ventures. And CBRE is a partner in that and responsible for negotiating the real estate deals for the partnership. So what it did, I was able to show by getting the deeds and the assessments out of the excellent Boston Assessors Database. It sold about almost a 2-acre plot of land that had been assessed in 1990 at $12.5 million. It sold it to the partnership for about $10.5 million. So, given that was a redevelopment area, and the assessed value was $12.5 million, for all we know, I do know that a lot of the acreage in that area was going for 2 or 3 times that amount, and they sold it for less than it had been assessed at 20 some odd years ago to themselves. Now, this is not so much the price; it's that they sold it to themselves. Now, what kind of guarantees that the post office got a good deal out of that? And then they turned around and sold another piece of land right near it to Goldman Sachs. Now, Goldman Sachs owns almost as much of CBRE as Mr. Blum's Blum Capital Partners owns. It owns 9.6%.
So they sold something in a very fancy area that's that's worth a lot. That's going to be worth a lot more when it's all developed to people who own part of their own real estate company.
Yeah, and for the parking lot that I talked about first. They sold it to themselves, basically. It was a partnership in which they were a member. And on the second deal, which is a smaller piece of land, they sold it to Goldman Sachs, who is an owner of their company.
Does the post office, I'm sorry, does the post office not have somebody who looks into these things, like an inspector general?
Well, they do have an inspector general who looks into these things, and the inspector general came out with a report in July, which basically damned the whole thing. He didn't go into the tremendous detail that I did, because they never do. But he basically said that the invoices that CBRE was submitting to the post office were not being checked for fraud. There was potential for conflicts of interest, and that the deal was vastly over budget. Their original $2 million contract price had inexplicably tripled. And I went a lot further than the Inspector General did. I actually, and one of the things I was able to obtain was the invoices. The invoices for the Boston deal are some of the most remarkable government documents that I've ever seen. They basically, the invoice for the first deal, the parking lot deal worth $10 million, didn't have the address on it, didn't have the value of the property and what it was sold, had almost no information on it whatsoever except for a bottom line that said pay us $360,000 fee. The contract that CBRE has with the post office explicitly does not allow for fees. It only is allowed for commissions based on the amount of the sales price.
Well, who approved this rank, corrupt garbage? Who approved this? Somebody at the post office must have looked at this and signed their name to it.
Tom Samraw. Mr. Samraw is the head of the facilities division. He's the man that oversees and all of the sales and oversees Mr. Blum's contract with the post office. Now, Mr. Samraw is an interesting character. Because he's a high-ranking post office official, equivalent to a vice president, he has to annually file a financial disclosure form, which, by the way, you can't. It was supposed to be available online, but then they didn't put them online, and so you have to request them through their attorneys. I got Mr. Samraw's disclosure, and I counted up the value of the securities and cash that he disclosed. He's worth between $38 and $98 million.
A post office executive?
Yeah, a lifelong post office bureaucrat who lives in a modest home in Vienna, Virginia, which you can see on Google Earth, is worth between $38 and $98 million. I also got his expense report. He flies all over the country signing off on these deals all the time. And he charges like the post office for like every bottle of water that he buys. He goes on vacations to Florida with his wife and charges the post office for that. And I was able to see that twice he flew first class to Europe, once to Paris and once to Switzerland.
Well, he was probably checking out post offices, right?
No, I think he was visiting a Swiss bankers is what he was doing.
No, Peter. He was looking at post offices to make sure what the real value was. Come on.
In Paris, and I asked Mr. Samraw via telephone, messages because he never picked up, and emails to explain the source of his wealth, and he didn't. No,
really, he didn't get back to you about that.
He didn't, and he didn't tell me what he was doing. And one of his expense reports said he met with Swiss official, right?
A Swiss official.
Swiss official, dinner with Swiss official. So the other thing I did was I got the credit card charges of his subordinates in the facilities division.
Yeah,
which is just it's actually quite sickening. I mean, they were spending thousands and thousands of dollars on eating at fancy restaurants, buying gift certificates, thousands of dollars of gift certificates online, buying inspirational literature.
Whoa. Inspirational literature?
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Like Christian books?
I guess. I mean,
but I guess you need inspiration if you're going to do things like that. I mean, well, is Tom's job appointed? Is Mr. Samara's job an appointed job?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not by like Obama or anything like that. I believe it would have to. He would be hired by the Postmaster General, and maybe with the approval of the Board of Governors of the Post Office. I don't know.
Well, somebody who has the job of being in charge of the facilities would be obviously in a position of tremendous power to enrich other people, like maybe somebody like, for instance, to pick a name, Richard Blum, right? So maybe he could get rewarded in some other way.
Well, actually, there was on his credit card expense report, there was an item that said met with CBRE, and then it blanked out the name of the person that he met with. And the post office lawyers told me that they didn't have to release that information because it was a matter of privacy. Now, here's a guy that just bought somebody from CBRE a lunch to meet with them, and we don't get to know who the name of the person is he met with.
Well, hey, let me ask you this: have you turned any of this information over to the Attorney General's office to request an investigation, or have you tried to testify or let people in Congress know about this? Clearly, we're dealing with massive corruption that should be on the front pages of every newspaper, and Dianne Feinstein is right in the middle of it. Is anybody going to investigate this?
Well, Ralph Nader wrote a letter to Senator Feinstein, which he made public. You can find it online, which he basically uses my entire investigation and says, Senator Feinstein, if you have good faith, you will call for an immediate moratorium on the sales of post offices and an investigation of your family's company. Last I heard from Mr. Nader, Feinstein hadn't gotten back to him.
What about...
Yeah,
go ahead.
One other thing, you're speaking about credit cards. There was an Inspector General report recently of how the top officials at the post office were using their credit cards, and they found that they were paying their home mortgages and buying computers.
Well, were they dismissed or held to some kind of? No, they weren't.
No, nothing happened. It's just apparently it's okay to do this.
But I guess there really isn't enough other money to keep giving people food stamps, though, right?
No,
there's no money for them.
Mix, you can die and they don't care, and it's actually really morally reprehensible and disgusting. And there's no oversight whatsoever. I mean, Ralph Nader is a very respected American, and has been successful over the years in getting many reforms made, but I think that we've reached such a level of blatant thievery that there's nobody watching the watchdogs anymore. There's nobody minding the store. And I have noticed because, with Google Analytics, I can see who trolls through my website.
Yeah.
And the post office spends an awful lot of time on my website.
Does it really? I bet they might be worried, I think. They should be worried.
And what pleases me no end, though, is I first released this book as an ebook, which is its best form because I was able to insert links into the e-publication that take you to a document cloud.
Oh, that's great.
Every time I assert a fact, you can go see the actual public records. You don't have to take my word for any of it. All the public records are there to back it up, and there's a print version of it, but then there's an ebook that you can read on your Kindle. Although, let me tell you, you don't have to have a Kindle. You can get a free Kindle app on Amazon and read it on any device.
Okay, that's good. And as far as is there a hardcover that you can order from Amazon?
Yeah, you can. It's also because of popular demand. There's a hardcover that you can get as well. So if you go to Amazon, Going Postal, Peter Byrne or Feinstein, it'll pop up and you can.
So either is available, the ebook, which can wind up on your tablet very easy, even if it's not a Kindle, and also you can order a paperback when you go there. So everybody should check this book out. I mean, this is extraordinary. What you're talking about is information that should be acted upon by the Attorney General's office. There should be congressional investigations, ethics investigations. There should be indictments, probably, of Feinstein, her husband, and maybe the person in charge of the facilities division, other people in the post office are robbing all of us of our taxes while they make speeches about how we don't have enough money for the poor or for Head Start or for the homeless or for seniors for food. This is something everybody should get involved in, and everybody should buy this book. Everybody should reward Mr. Byrne here, Peter Byrne, Byrne. Everybody should buy the book just simply to reward him for being courageous enough and dogged enough to get this information about how these people are corrupt and how they're cheating and stealing from us. And also they should buy this because it's a good book. And why don't you give the title one more time?
Well, it's Going Postal. U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband sells post offices to his friends cheap. It's available exclusively through Amazon. The ebook is only $2.99. The print version, I think, is $9.95 or something. And it's a blueprint for an indictment. I mean, I've done my work, so now it's up to the people to demand accountability. And, you know, you did mention that, you know, it should be on the front page of every newspaper in America, and it should be. But, you know, for some reason, you know, Ms. Feinstein and her husband, who are major powers in the Democratic Party and in you know, the federal government, seem to be Teflon when it comes to the press. They rarely get criticized or looked at. And, you know, I'm a highly respected, award-winning career investigative journalist, and every single fact that I report here can be proven with a public record. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is not an idle accusation. This is a provable indictment that needs to be picked up by the American people who demand accountability of these people before they wake up and there's no post office left.
Do you have any other? Have you any other interviews scheduled for, or have they had interviews on places like MSNBC?
No, I've had a few radio interviews, you know, like the Pacifica stations, the local Bay Area stuff, and then I was on some TV show, WDNT, which serves Boston and Florida. There's and they put the thing on YouTube. I guess if you look for Feinstein Billionaire Post Office, it'll pop up.
I would suggest to anybody who's listening to this too, if you also listen to any show on MSNBC, or if you listen to other shows on this station like Ed Schultz and those people, why don't you call up the producers, or why don't you get in touch with them and suggest very strongly that they interview Peter, because this is a major story. It should result in major punishments and major savings of billions of millions and millions of dollars, maybe money that would have to be given back after indictments. So I would pressure the media too, if you're listening, to get Peter's book more widespread.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to work with any media and show them exactly how, you know, this story developed. I mean, actually, I don't have to tell them anything. It's all right there. It's clear as a bell. You don't, you know, a kindergartner could understand it. And it's a crime for the media not to report on this further.
Well, I mean,
it's hurting people.
As you know as well as I do, most of the, maybe 90% of what people get their news from is owned by interlocking corporations, some of which are probably owned by the same people who are selling this real estate. So this is a part of your answer, but people have to try anyhow. So, and it should be.
It's a bipartisan thing. It's a bipartisan thing.
Well, there you go.
This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is about, you know, shall we call them a ruling class entity that's sticking it to the normal people.
Well, business as usual. I mean, look at Mr. Obama's most recent appointment to a cabinet office, Penny Pritzker, Secretary of Commerce, the head of you know, the head of Hyatt Hotels, one of the worst records of cheating people, including low ball mortgages in the whole country. You know. Well,
yeah. I mean, Obama's been like Goldman Sachs front man for the past 6 years.
All right, Peter Byrne, Going Postal, Byrne. Since there's probably other books that have that title, it's called Going Postal, and the author is Peter Byrne. Everybody should take a look at this book, should buy it. It's cheap enough, and should tell media outlets, even locally, to interview Mr. Byrne. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Okay. All right. Did we not take a break? Okay, we're going to take a break. When I come back, I'd like to get some calls from you on this. I used up my voice for the next 5 shows in the first hour, so I need your help tonight. 866-997-4748. Call up during the break, and we'll put you right on the air. Okay, welcome back to the Mike Feder Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Who do we have? Fanny in Woodstock. You're on, Fanny.
Hi.
Hi.
So now that you are talking about the post office is very, it's very clear to me because I have been living in Woodstock for, like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like 20 years ago, the post office was sold. The post office had a rental space, and they were supposed to move to a piece of land that they had bought years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so because they wanted to, consolidate. And instead, they moved to a swamp area that was owned by a Republican legislator or something like that. And he had this land that he had bought it probably on the pennies. And he, he was able to convince some way or another to sell it to the post office, for quite a big amount of money. And then they filled it up with who knows what, because it was a swamp. And, the whole town, the town was really very against it. And I remember we were, protesting and doing everything against doing that. But they went along. And, the post office was built there and on top of the swamp. They came and it up with who knows what. And it's on a mold. And now that you are telling me, this has been going on for many years, I guess.
Yeah, well, see, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of corruption to the tune of billions of dollars for the last couple of decades at the post office, and we don't even know about it. And this guy wrote a book about it, and nobody's doing anything about it. So this is something that if we had a Democratic government, we would actually have a gigantic scandal, and people would be paying up, doing the right thing, and be thrown in jail, including Dianne Feinstein, who should be in jail for the rest of her unnatural life. Okay, I'm going to move on. Yeah, I'm going to have to move on.
I agree because this is, Woodstock is a very small town. It's like 3,500 people, period. Imagine what's happening in bigger towns.
Oh, it's even worse. Fanny, I should move on. I've got a bunch of people calling. Is it okay if I?
Okay, bye.
Yeah, thanks, Fanny. Thanks for calling. And say hi to Jimmy for me. Okay, who else? George in Pennsylvania, you're on.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hi.
Yeah, good luck getting the rest of the media to pay attention to these stories. I mean,
see, that's what always infuriates me. Here's a guy who wrote an extraordinary book, did tremendous amount of investigation, should be a gigantic scandal, should be all over the headlines and on everywhere. And so basically what you'd have to do is, I'm sorry to elucidate like this, but you'd have to think of someplace like MSNBC, a supposedly liberal or left-wing organization, or some gigantic news organization like the New York Times. They should be taking this and they should be interviewing this guy and running with this story. It's like a breaking story, and they're ignoring it.
Well, even the weekday hosts of Sirius Progressive, which I listen to every day, they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole because really they're just too busy defending the Democratic Party in general and Obama in particular.
Well, that's a damn shame. I mean, it's really not their job.
We have a sports team mentality. We're rooting for two teams that belong to the same league, right? It doesn't really matter if the Democrat or Republicans win because they're owned by the league, and it's the league itself, the ruling elite wins. But that's not what I called. What I called for is a story that I read posted November 19th at The Nation. There's a group called the Business Roundtable that are just so concerned with the national debt and the contributions to the national debt by Social Security, which are death, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's made up of 200 of the country's richest CEOs. These are guys who have hundreds of millions of dollars banked away for their retirement. And, of course, what they're recommending is that we need to raise the retirement age and cut benefits for Social Security recipients to solve this problem.
Something needs to be cut. It's probably some throats.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the mentality you were talking about in the first hour where they got theirs and they don't care about anybody else. Of course, what really needs to be done with Social Security, and anybody with half a brain will tell you this, is you need to blow out the cap. Either raise it or eliminate it completely, and that's it.
It's 113,000 now. It should be up to it should be 5 million to start with.
And it should apply to capital gains.
Yeah, and they should exactly.
These guys would sit there. The one gentleman who heads this up is looking at a retirement package that will pay him $800,000 a month, not a year, a month for the rest of his life. $135 million over the span of his life.
And he's concerned
he's
that
sitting there telling you that we need to cut the benefits for the people who are just barely getting by.
In any
evolved into a country where you can only really hope to be part of the middle class while you're working. And then when we're done with you, when we throw you on the scrap heap of labor, then you're just supposed to die quickly and go away.
In any decent society, these people, these rich people who speak this way and act this way, would be yanked out of their houses and their offices. Things would be done to them. All of their property and all their assets would be taken away and given to people who are in dire need in any decent society. But I guess we don't have a decent society. So, listen, I'm going to move on and take one more call. Thanks for calling.
All right, thanks, Mike. Hey, happy Thanksgiving, by the way.
Yeah, and you too. Okay.
No happy, no thanks, and no giving, but we'll combine those anyway.
Smiley faces for you too. All right then.
Thanks,
Okay. All right. We have time for one more call. Who do we have? Okay, Stephen in Burbank. Before we take your call, Stephen, I just want to let everybody know. Thank you. We got a lot of people calling up. We're not going to be able to get to you before this hour is over. We're going to have an interview at 7:00. Not going to last that long. Please call me back and tell me whatever it was you were going to tell me this hour. Even if you're knocked off by sports broadcasting, you can always still call up and express your opinion. Stephen, I got about a minute for you.
Okay, I will do that, Mike. I'll let you go to your break. I'll call back when it seems apropos.
Oh, okay. So call back next time, and then I can give you much more time.
Are you going to give a call out for us to call, or should I?
Yeah, no. After the interview, which would be about 20 minutes at 7:00, 15 or 20 minutes, then it's time for calls for the rest of that time.
Now that I have the parameters, I know how to operate.
Okay, fine.
Ah.
You know the rules. Do what you're supposed to. Okay, bye. All right, that's it. All right, I'm done. Except that we still have, 50 seconds? Let's all count them together. 1, 2. Now, see? That's not why I'm being paid the big bucks. Put some music on, will you? I can't stand talking anymore. I've had it. I don't want to talk anymore. We know, I want to go do something. We don't just talk, we do. Let's do something.
I wanna be a billionaire so fucking bad. Buy all of the things I never had. I wanna be on the cover of Forbes magazine, smiling next to Oprah and the Queen.
This is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Progress 127. If you want to hear get other information about radio shows I do on other stations, you should go to my website, faderfiles.com, FEDERFILES.com, faderfiles.com. Give you information about things I write and other radio work I do. And if you have anything that you want to say about tonight's show, it's also a good place to contact me. Just recently in Washington, in the state of Washington, a machinists union voted down an offer by the Boeing Corporation to attack basically their compensation packages. And Boeing is saying that it will have to move out of the state. It'll move their company out of the state. The production of specifically one particular jet, 777X, and other stuff, presumably, to another state that is more welcoming, perhaps, to corporations, someplace like Texas. I don't know what they're thinking of. But basically, the machinists were given a take it or leave it, an offer by Boeing, and they actually left it. They turned it down, which is hopefully a kind of a major turning point, but it's a risky thing they did. And tonight we have Jeffrey Johnson with us, and he is going to discuss this. Jeffrey Johnson is the head of the Washington State Labor. Is it Labor Council, AFL-CIO?
It is.
Yes, okay. And he's the president of that group. And could you give me just a little bit of tell me exactly what your office entails? I mean, who you represent, and who am I talking to here, basically?
Sure. So the Washington State Labor Council, we're the State Federation of Labor, the state chapter of the AFL-CIO. We represent over 400,000 union members in the state of Washington. Those members comprise about 500 local unions. So, and the machinists are one of our affiliates.
Now, The situation, can you describe the basic situation? I mean, Boeing was offering their contract. Is their contract up soon or what?
No. In fact, their contract doesn't come up until 2016. So they're in the middle of their contract right now. They had just extended, about a year and a half ago, they had just extended their contract for another couple years in an agreement they made with the company to produce the new 737 MAX airplane. And, so we kind of hit a high mark of good labor management relations in the extension of that contract.
And and that's not so long ago, right?
That was not that long ago. No, just a couple of years ago.
So in the last couple of years, what has transpired that Boeing is suddenly pressuring the machinists union, and what is going on that's changed so much?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, I know that the Boeing Corporation has been losing market share to Airbus and other airframe manufacturers. The last big plane that put on the 787 because of a faulty business model that had them parting out parts of the plane all around the world, kind of a worldwide supply system. It didn't work. And, of course, the machinists and the engineers that work for Boeing were telling them all along this is not going to work very well, and indeed it didn't. So they're still losing money on the 787. So this next big plane, this 777X, this is the one they've got this is the one that'll help them regain market share and regain profitability. That said, the company actually has hit its highest profit rates and revenue in the last quarter in the whole history of the company. So right now their profits are way up. They're doing quite well. And this 777X, like I said, is the plane that we hope allows them to regain market share and be profitable into the future.
Well, I mean, presumably they may have learned that if the main reason why the 787 didn't work out so well is they were having things made in other places where they couldn't control the production as well, that they would keep the production here with skilled people, right?
That's right, and that's what we feel. We've got really skilled machinists and engineers in this state, and in fact, our machinists produce the 777 jet right now, and the X is just is the next generation. So we've got decades of experience of building these wide-body planes, and it just makes sense that they would expand production here rather than going someplace else.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So their profit went up, and what does their CEO get paid, by the way?
This is approximate. I mean, it's
sure, all right.
North of $20 million a year.
Okay.
And what we had just learned was that if you take a look at the pension guarantee that he has, it comes out to about a little bit over $250,000 a month.
A month.
Yeah.
And so, what does Boeing want the machinists to do that they found so objectionable?
Well, it was the proposal put before the machinists. I think the hardest thing was the rank and file members had about a week to take a look at it. And there were some sweeteners in the contract, but there were also some huge takeaways, the largest of which would have been to end the defined benefit pension program. And what's interesting about the machinist union out here, District Clause 751, is that the workforce at Boeing really is an intergenerational workforce. Grandparents, parents, sons, daughters, nieces, nephews work for the Boeing company. I was at a big function of the machinists 2 weeks ago. It was the Saturday night before the vote, and while I knew this, it didn't really sink in until that banquet. And as I talked to a lot of the rank and workers, it's a family workforce, right? And so it would have been impossible for parents to vote to end, secure retirement income for their kids. It just wasn't going to happen.
And as far as health insurance, and how did that work out?
Yeah, so they were proposing that the workers pick up a much greater share of the health insurance costs. What got reported in the newspapers was about a 30% increase in the workers' share. What I've heard from those that had actually seen the numbers, it probably would have been even higher than that. Mm-hmm. So that was quite a cut as well. They also right now it takes about 6 years to go from the minimum wage level in a classification to the maximum wage level. This proposal would have taken about 18 years to go from minimum to maximum. So quite drastic changes.
So, and what is Boeing saying, or has said? What have they said if this contract was not approved, which it wasn't temporarily at least?
Yeah. So what they said was essentially what you started the show with. This is a take it or leave it proposal. If the workers don't vote it up, then they're going to put a RFP or a bid out to the country, to all the other states, and with the primary states being South Carolina, Texas, California.
But surely those places don't have anything like the trained experience, even generationally trained experience that these people do, right?
That's what we believe. I mean, South Carolina, of course, they have a 787 line out there that they created about 5 or 6 years ago outside of Charleston, in South Carolina. And the deal is this. I mean, so they've got the land there, they've got hangars there, they've got the basic ingredients to build wide-body planes down there, but they don't have that accumulated experience, skill level of the workers yet. So, for example, they're supposed to be producing 3 787 planes per month in South Carolina. They've yet to reach 1 plane per month, and in fact, out of the first 5 planes that they produced there, 4 of them had to be sent to Washington State for our machinists, basically, to put them back together.
Well, that's extraordinary. I mean, there's a pretty clear sign, but go ahead.
Yeah, so in our state, as a consequence, we're supposed to be producing 7 of these 787s per month, and we're pumping out 9 per month. So, our folks can do it. They've got the experience. They want to produce it. It's just that this contract was way too one-sided, too unbalanced.
How many jobs are we talking about here?
Yeah, so, direct machinist jobs, we believe it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, between 10 to 12,000 jobs there. Then, twice as many when you look at indirect jobs. And, and then there'll be an increase in, thousands of jobs in the aerospace supply sector, because we have about 800,000 aerospace supply companies in our state as well. And, they would expand with this production of this new plane.
So if Boeing did move its operations out of Washington State, it would be a tremendous blow to the economy of Washington State entirely. And also I understand that the state of Washington gave them an unprecedented tax break, right?
Yeah, they did, yeah. If they were to move out, yes, it would be a huge blow to our economy. If they expand production, our economy will get a good boost, great boost. Yeah, so legislature, our governor called our legislature into a special session about 2 weeks ago, and in the course of 3 days, they passed 2 pieces of legislation. One was a set of tax incentives that would be worth between now and the year 2040, $8.7 billion. It's the largest set of tax incentives given in the history of the United States. The second bill did 2 things. It invested a lot of state money into high-tech positions in our community and technical college system and our university systems, basically to produce technical workers, engineers for the aerospace industry. And the other thing it did was it kind of streamlined permitting processes so that the company could build what they need to build much more quickly.
So all of this, a proven track record for these workers, which has been proven over and over again in the ways that you mentioned. I just found out that the CEO salary at Boeing now is $27.5 million a year.
There you go.
And they're making record profits. They get an unprecedented historical tax break, but they're still threatening. Is it a real threat, do you think, to move out of the state?
You know, we take everything they say as possible as real. Okay, so we look at it as a real threat. However, we do believe that, you know, if you read the aerospace analysts out there, they're all saying that the smart money is they need to build it here, because then they can actually bring the plane to production on time, rebuild their market share. But you know, you never know with a company that you know, they made a bad mistake with the 787. They could do that again. We hope not. We really do want them to expand here.
Well, a company that rewards that gives their CEO an extra $8 million or $7 million rather over his previous pay as a reward for screwing up, you never know what they're going to do. So the article you wrote had a lot to do with you related the union's actions to trying to preserve or trying to keep the middle class surviving, and you keep stressing the middle class all the time. You know, we've been talking the whole show, and we often talk here about how there is tremendous income inequality, almost unequaled in American history, except maybe for the Gilded Age. And it's getting worse all the time. So you were stressing the middle class, and that doesn't seem to make much difference or matter much, not just to corporations at all anymore, but in fact, the politicians who in Washington or at state level, but particularly at federal level, who might be putting certain pressures on corporations. I mean, many corporations don't even pay their taxes.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And what we're seeing is a real resurgence in Washington State. Our labor movement, our unions and our community partners have, taken up the charge on income inequality, both in terms of legislation we've put before our state legislature, but as well in organizing a little town of SeaTac, where our Seattle airport is. You know, we just passed an ordinance there. It passed by 76 votes, but it passed, and it creates a $15 minimum wage for workers in that airport district. It creates paid sick days for them. It allows tipped employees to keep the full amount of their tips, and it also requires that when a business creates more jobs, that they be full-time jobs rather than part-time. So, you know, this is one way in which we're trying to address the issues of inequality. And what the vote that the machinists made, 2 weeks ago, we looked at that as a very courageous vote, and one that really did stand up for community standards. And in fact, we had a huge rally this past Monday in downtown Seattle, where we had about 1,000 community folks come out to support the Machinists Union and say, you did the right thing, and, we're with you, thank you.
One last question. I'm speaking to Jeffrey Johnson, and he's the president of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO. I was beginning the show tonight earlier, and I'm sure you're well aware of this. McDonald's and Walmart's as emblems of various kinds of industries. Walmart particularly as emblems of all service industries or retail industries. Their average pay for a McDonald's worker or a Walmart's worker, even after being there 5 or 10 years, and they rarely get full-time jobs. They play around with their hours, is something like about $10.25 an hour. And half of these employees, and we're talking about over 1.5 million people, get food stamps and get other kinds of public assistance. So basically, your tax money and my tax money is supporting Walmart and McDonald's corporations, which make tremendous profits too. We're giving our tax money for welfare to people. We wouldn't have to do that if they were paying a decent wage. Now, the bottom line, what I'm getting to here is they have been trying to form unions, and they're going out on strikes and walkouts. Is your Washington State Labor Council helping them?
Absolutely. We participated with the Our Walmart organization, and in their Black Friday events last year, as well as events coming up this year. No, absolutely. We supported the fast food workers who struck in Seattle this summer over a $15 minimum wage in the fast food industry. No, we're going to see more and more of this uprising, and community and unions working together to try to right the injustices out here. Because you're absolutely right. As citizens, we're subsidizing these huge multinational mega profitable companies, and it's just not right. I mean, they're destroying our country. They're destroying the middle class.
All right. Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because if it's not for the unions, then maybe allied with some other massive kind of civil disobedience like the Occupy movement, we've had it. Because voting for either one of these two parties on a federal level at this point is not going to make much difference. So, thank you very much for the work, and thanks for coming on.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Okay. Jeff McDonald, president of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO. And I'm glad to hear that these people are supporting the other workers. Okay, everybody who called before, you can call back now. You can crowd the switchboard. You can make the engineer's life a living hell, because he has to answer these things and run back and forth. But he could use the exercise, and so call up. I promised, and I don't want to break my promise. 86. What is it? 87s. The number should be at the bottom of your little radio there. 866-997-4748. So give us a call. I promise that you'd be able to get back on the air. You can talk about anything you want. We talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and if we don't get to your call right away, we will. In fact, what we're going to do is, after we answer this, is we're going to take a break and get that out of the way, so I don't forget that. And get myself fired, because you can't do that. You can't just not take a commercial break. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to make money for people who make gold Viagra, so you can rub it on your nose or whatever it is they sell here. Okay, let's take a break, and we're going to come back. All right, straight to the calls. Who do we have? Jake in Sherman Oaks. Anybody else who wants to call? We've got 35 minutes roughly, 30 minutes actually. So join the rest of the callers. We'll put you online and we'll get to you. Jake, go ahead.
Hey,
whoa. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say today. Oh, sorry.
I
just want to say I don't understand giving a $15 an hour minimum wage. Aren't jobs like fast food jobs supposed to be where you start out in life? Or if you do happen to be working at that sort of a job, when you're 40, isn't it still just a place that's supposed to be a Band-Aid in your life? It's not supposed to be where you really go to make your living unless you're in management?
So what do you do for a living?
I have retail. I have gift stores.
I'm sorry, you're what?
I'm in the retail business. I have gift stores.
You have gift stores. Oh, so you own some stores.
I'm a business owner, yeah.
Oh, okay. So you have the people who work in your stores. What kind of pay do they get?
They get. It depends where they're at, but they'll start at $9 or $10 an hour, and then they'll could make 40, 50, 60 a year, something like that eventually.
So if somebody's making like the average pay for McDonald's and Walmart's is, for people who work pretty hard, by the way, if they get $10.50 an hour, let's say, they will wind up, because they often don't get full-time jobs because the management won't give it to them. They might make $15,000 to $18,000 to $20,000 an hour, which is poverty wages. In other words, you can't really live in America on that. So you don't think in a company that's making billions of dollars of profit that they could make, let's say, 10% less profit, pay people extra so that we don't have to give them food stamps and welfare, and that they could pay for their own food and rent without having to go and borrow money from all of us in the federal government? Wouldn't that be a good idea?
If it would really work like that, it would be a great idea.
Well, it would really work like that.
But I think we know that what would happen is those people who were given wages like that would only ask for more. And then we also know that prices would be raised so that the business owners could achieve the previous profit that they used to make.
Well, maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they shouldn't make so much profit.
But they would. It's the very nature of business as it is.
Well, maybe as a society, what we should do is interfere with that nature of business and address the larger issue of the common human welfare, since we're all in the same boat. There's no reason why the head of Walmart should get paid $20 million a year, and somebody who stands up all day long loading and unloading trucks should get paid $9 an hour. That's not right.
Well, I think that you can't compare the two jobs.
I just did. You know what? I just did.
I know. I'm saying I wouldn't, because I think one is a spectacularly high-skilled job of have incomprehensible stress levels and extraordinary temperament versus just somebody who, could learn how to operate a cash register or lift the box.
So that's what you think. That's what you think. It's just anybody could do that kind of job. There's not a lot of stress involved. There's not a lot of fatigue. There's not a lot of problems. Anybody could do that job, and they shouldn't complain. Really.
No, I think you should complain, and you should try to get beyond that. But I don't think you can compare the extremely exceptional nature of a CEO of Walmart. By the way, I don't shop at Walmart. I don't like Walmart.
Why? Why?
I guarantee that
Why?
Because I think they're town destroyers. I think they come in and ruin a town and ruin the small businesses and take away the individuality of all the little businesses.
Yeah, you know what? I agree. I agree they do that. And you know one way that they're able to do that? In fact, the major way they're able to do that is because their prices are so low. And you know why their prices are so low? Because the stuff that's supplied to them is supplied by slave labor in places like China, and their employees make so little and get so few hours. That's why they can come in and destroy towns. What I'm telling you as a business owner and somebody who's interested in the life of a town, just like we both are, is if they paid their employees more, then they would have to charge more, they would make less profit, and they wouldn't put so many small businesses out of work.
Again, I agree with the principle of what you're saying, but in reality, I don't think it's something that can actually work. I think that, as I said, people who are given things, let's say some legislation happened that would give people $15 an hour, inevitably someone would start talking about $17 an hour and $20 an hour.
And what would be, excuse me, what would be wrong with that?
What would be wrong with it is that it was legislated and not earned.
Earned? What do you mean earned? If somebody works hard, why shouldn't they ask for more money?
They can ask, but they should not have someone outside of the company force them.
No, I don't really think so either. I think what should happen is there should be massive strikes, and they should picket outside the houses of these people who are so rich. They should embarrass them. They should shame them. They should do massive civil disobedience and massive strikes, just the way all strikes throughout American history have achieved workable conditions for workers and gotten more pay for workers. And they should force these people to accept less profit, less pay at the CEO level, and that they should get more pay and they have a living wage themselves. That's the way I see it. Listen, thanks for calling. I'm going to move on. Who do we have? Stephen. Okay, Stephen, you're on.
Okay, it's about the post office, and what's happening is if you want to go to the front lines to be a good fighter, fight the good fight, you have to be willing to take the hit. Citibank sent me a solicitation for a credit card, and it had a postage-paid envelope with my return address in the upper left-hand corner. On the other side of the envelope, it said any kind of tampering with the contents or of this envelope itself will result in legal action. Or it said it may result in legal action. And I thought, well, gee whiz, I've been doing this to the Democrats for years. I use their postage-paid envelopes. They ask for money, and I tell them, I already paid you. Like in the real world, first you do the work, then you get paid. Mm-hmm. I gave them all the money in the world for EFCA, Employee Free Choice Act. I gave them all the money in the world for halfway decent healthcare system. We didn't get it. So now I'm using their own money, their own postage-paid envelopes to benefit the post office. Because I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that they have to pay that postage rate. And that would be beneficial to the post office.
Okay.
So we put ourselves on the line in the same respect with the ACLU postage paid, People for the American Way postage paid. And so that's where we have to get the people in line to start drawing the line. When I send into ACLU, I mark off the postage paid permit number, and I actually put on a real stamp bought from the post office because it benefits the post office.
Okay.
But maybe that's a small way of having a little semi-revolution.
All right. Thanks for calling. I appreciate it. That's a good point. Okay.
Okay, boss.
Bye. What do we have? Charles in Illinois. You're on.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to Jake, who said the workers shouldn't make $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
In 1970, I worked in a grocery store that had a union. I made $2.51 an hour, and in 2013 dollars, that'd be $15.15. That was a high school. That's how far things have gone as far as deflation of wages.
Well, Jake, who called it before, obviously has contempt for most people and thinks that there are certain classes of individuals and, they're expendable, sort of like cows.
Yeah, I sent you some Jonathan Swift quotes, modest proposals.
Yeah, he's always good for
appropriate.
Yeah. All right. I'll check them out. So they'll probably be on a computer when I get back, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else, or should we move on, or feel free? Feel free.
My nephew, who has a bachelor's degree, went to work for NBC in Paducah. They started him out at $12.50, and he had a bachelor's degree. So I was making more as a bagging groceries than he was with a bachelor's degree.
Well, a bachelor's degree isn't worth much anymore, and one of the reasons is because there isn't much of a middle class, and most of the jobs have been shipped overseas, and because people at the top have too much money. It needs to be taken away from them one way or another. I wouldn't recommend what way, but I could think of it in my dreams. I can't say it out loud on the radio because it's illegal, but their money needs to be taken away from them, like the Walmarts, and distributed to other people who do the actual work.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you for calling. All right. Who do we have? Stephen, North Carolina. Stephen, you're on.
No, South Carolina.
Oh, South. I'm sorry. South Carolina. Go ahead.
Yes, I was listening to your show earlier on Mr. Burns going postal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I was wondering why Republicans are not jumping on this story. I mean, I can see why maybe Democrats that are, have connections with Dianne Feinstein and might not want to report on it. But
well, I'll tell you,
unless Republicans are also, mixed up in this whole mess as well.
Well, they are. I mean, as Mr. Burns said, this was a bipartisan vote, and it was passed through with support from both parties. Both parties are interested in having the post office privatized. Both parties do not want to be exposed as far as their corruption and involvement in these things. So they both have something at stake.
Okay, well, that's what I assumed. And
well, the original bill, which basically broke the post office unnecessarily and almost illegally, was proposed and passed and pushed through by Darrell Issa, who is a prominent right-wing Republican.
Oh yes, yeah, I'm very familiar with him.
And he's the second richest man. He's the second richest man in Congress, and he has $400 million.
Right.
But that's not enough for him. He probably needs $401 million by tomorrow, so he can probably. So that's why it's important. It's important to cut out $40 billion in food aid to the hungry, so that people like Darrell Issa and Dianne Feinstein can get even richer than they are. I mean, really, we are poised at the very edge of what in history in other countries and other places has been a time of revolution. When the rich have everything, they have contempt for all the rest of us. They treat us like crap. They don't care if we die. Sometimes it's necessary in history, when you read it, for the people to actually take its own government back by any means necessary.
And on that note also, I noticed that when Democrats spend a lot of time talking about the middle class, you don't hear them talk very much about the poor. And Obama in particular, he talks a lot about the middle class, but spends very little time talking about the poor.
The only people they're ever going to talk about are people who might vote for them or give them money. Why talk about somebody if they're not going to give them any money? I mean, people who don't have money are worthless. You heard Jake who called before. He's one of those. That's the American belief amongst a lot of people who basically own and run the country. If you don't have money, you're shit. If you have money, you maybe could get listened to.
Yeah.
I mean, look at MSNBC. Look at MSNBC. They pay those people $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year to basically be hacks for the Democratic Party. It's all about money. I mean, somebody on a station like my station here, can talk about this stuff. It doesn't involve money that much. You know what I mean? But when you get paid $6 million a year by a major corporation like NBC, you're not going to have stories on like this. This guy, Peter Byrne, and his story should be on every major television station. It should be thrown in headlines across every major newspaper. The fact that it's not shows that the press is corrupt and useless as the people who they're supposed to be covering.
And from what he said, the government's complicit, and saying that I remember there was something he said was national security or something. And,
they told him he couldn't get certain information. He couldn't get certain information about contracts they had because it would be equivalent to leaking national security documents to him, which is just utter nonsense. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm not surprised about corrupt politicians, but I'm obviously disappointed in Dianne Feinstein, but I'm also disappointed in MSNBC, and I hope they do report on this.
Well, and Dianne Feinstein. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to write to them, but
yeah. I mean, I think if there's an email, if there's a way to contact MSNBC or a specific producer there or a host, I think everybody should write to them and say, "Why aren't you covering Peter Burns going postal?" That's all you have to say.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know.
Yeah,
and I will get his book. Thank you very much for for bringing him on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I think everybody should know these kinds of things. And obviously, unfortunately, very few people know it. He's talking about a major, decades-old, current functioning government scandal of immense corruption. And the only reason that probably you're not hearing the Democrats do anything about it is because they're in power now.
Right.
All right.
I mean, I'm Democrat because they're incrementally more concerned about the middle class and poor than Republicans, but not,
Hey, Dianne Feinstein.
It's the same on both sides.
Dianne Feinstein and her son of a bitch husband have about $70 million in assets. Dianne Feinstein is the primary leader in the whole Congress to spy on all of us. She loves that more than anybody else. She practically accuses anybody who even questions the NSA spying. She accuses them of being a traitor, right? Dianne Feinstein should be stuffed and put in a museum of greed in some sort of gigantic glass case along with her husband as examples of American greed. Anyhow, I got to move on. Take other calls.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Who do we have? Chris in California. Oh, sorry, Bill. Bill in California.
Yeah, hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, great show today, Mike.
Thanks.
I really like your interview style and everything. It was just great. I want to talk about something that's a slightly different topic, but it affects every topic under the sun, and that's global warming.
Okay.
And if we don't get off fossil fuel and get serious about it, all these other issues that are important to us aren't going to amount to anything. Because, no Earth, no people, no issues. We're at 400 parts per million now, kind of say 300 parts per million of CO2, and the atmosphere is red lights and sirens, and we just passed 400. And we're building power stations are going up in India and everywhere else, coal-fired. Now, there's a new nuclear technology out. A lot of people are against nuclear. They're afraid of it because of bombs and Fukushima.
Yeah.
There's a new technology out that is powered by thorium. It's a different element on the periodic scale. And there have been thorium reactors built. They were built at Oak Ridge Labs by a guy named Alvin Weinberg back in the 60s, Dr. Weinberg. And he said, we better do this because he foresaw global warming and predicted the exact CO2 level we have today. He predicted that back in the 60s. And he built a thorium reactor and ran it successfully. But politically, Nixon and Washington wanted to go with uranium because bombs could be made out of that. And thorium will not produce plutonium and, give us the ability to make bombs. Thorium is extremely abundant in the earth. we gotta switch over to that technology. It's a great technology. We need to build reactors, test them out. China is going big time on thorium, and India is too, and Norway, and a lot of other places. So everybody contact first of all, go and Google thorium reactors on your computer, and all kinds of things will pop up. Look for Kirk Sorensen. He's one of the leading engineers in this technology. But you know, I believe in all your issues are good, Mike. But we gotta keep the earth here, and you know, we've lost a lot of crops, and that's going to continue on up. It's going to ramp right on up.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. In fact, I have written to and now am in communication with James Hansen, and he's got a new report that right now is being finished off and is going to come out in December, and he's going to come on the show and talk about it. So I agree with you.
That's great. Yep. Do you see the show Pandora's Promise on CNN? They had a special.
No, but a lot of people have told me about it.
Last week, I was amazed that they would have that on. It is so pro-nuclear, and it talks about the fact that wind and solar, which I love, I've got wind and solar on my sailboat. Mm-hmm. It's not enough. It's not enough to take over from fossil fuel. It's one right now. It's less than 10%.
When he comes on, I'm going to ask him about thorium. So thanks for calling. I should probably move on. Give some other people an opportunity.
Thanks for the show, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
Great show.
I appreciate it. Do we have more calls? Aaron in Ann Arbor. Aaron, you're on, Aaron.
Hey there. I would like to respond to Jake. I wish I could have spoken to him directly. First of all, I wonder, does he hire workers or does any business for no reason, or is the work necessary? And do they make money off of workers, or be able to continue their money-making operation because they have those workers? And if they're not just hiring them for the fun of it or for charity, then those people have natural bargaining power and should be able to demand whatever work is necessary if they were allowed to refuse work. In other words, like you said, boycott, and if the citizens were with them, if we were all realized we're workers and could strike and do national strikes. But it is only through, because if you change the rules so that workers had to be paid and profit had to be lessened in order to make that happen, that would be government interference. But it is only through government interference and through the laws and the courts and ultimately guns that make rules making it difficult to unionize and boycott and strike, and it's illegal to have sympathy strikes, in other words, national strikes like they do in civilized countries, so that the people have power. So it is only government interference in the system that's why we have this current power structure and relationship in the first place, and it's arbitrary decisions of people at the top who value various types of work the way they do, coincidentally, because they get all the money that way. And his crap about these exceptional people who are the CEOs, study after study has shown that executive decisions are like rolling the dice. Mm-hmm. And these people constantly fail, constantly make bad decisions for the companies, constantly get fired, constantly die, and they're always replaced.
That's right.
Magically, another genius appears.
No, it's basically he's just spouting a lot of Ayn Randism. That's all he's doing, and also he owns companies, so it's in his interest to keep wages low. And in fact, it is important that government does get involved in minimum wage and labor laws and unionizing, which they did around 1900 to 1950. They got very involved in it. So they got rid of child labor laws. The government had to do this because if we trusted capitalism, we'd all be worked to death in mines and in caves. That's what capitalism is all about. So we needed our government to interfere to make these people, talking about using guns and arresting people, indicting people and putting them in jail. The government was necessary to do that. Now the government's more on the other side, like you're saying. I'm going to have to move on, take another call. Thanks, Aaron. Who do we have? Chris in Boston, you're on.
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to say that it's really refreshing. It's the first time I've caught your show.
Oh.
Your direct and unapologetic explanation of the rich's liquidity, while at the bottom 80% of America splits 7% of the wealth. right?
Yeah,
So
it's amazing.
250 million Americans are fighting over 7 cents on the dollar. And that's just unsustainable from an economic perspective. It's unsustainable from a social perspective. And so I just wanted to thank you first off. This guy, Jake, I'm a business owner. And I put on LinkedIn all the time. I own a sustainable housing company that I'm trying to get off the ground. I own a non-toxic tub and tile restoration company. Not that they're a big deal, but my biggest problem is a lack of demand. The people in our neighborhoods can't afford to purchase the services that they need to maintain and improve their homes or their lives. And we continually, when we talk about higher wages, neglect to discuss the effect that would come from this, that yes, you could raise prices because there is more money in the economy and we would create more demand. And I think that man doesn't understand, and he's made this comment, right? CEOs have a temperament. The level of stress they deal with. When you have 2 kids and you have to work 6 days a week and still go home and tell your wife that you have to go down to the state and hope that you can get your health care subsidized. I'll tell you what temperament is, because when I see the guy in the Range Rover at the gas station, you want to know how much temperament I'm controlling? Don't tell me about temperament. Okay,
that's one way to put it.
So I really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm going to tune in more often, and thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling, and I appreciate that. Yeah, temperament, it takes a special temperament to be a CEO. You have to be a sadistic, inhuman, insensitive son of a bitch. It takes a special temperament. Most people aren't like that. Yeah, who do we have? Kendall, you're on, Kendall.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I think you stated a couple weeks ago you thought everybody in a given company should be paid exactly the same thing, from the owner to the guy that sweeps the floor.
I think that's a kind of an ideal to strive with, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying you should get paid the exact same thing as Howard Stern?
No, I think everybody should get paid in an equal way. What I'm saying is that people like, who make like a $50 million or $70 million should get paid like maybe $1 million, and all the rest of the people here should get paid a hell of a lot more than they do. And finally, eventually, we should all wind up making the same thing.
So you're saying Howard Stern hasn't contributed much more to Sirius XM than you have? I mean,
Kendall, there's a certain element of like disgusting dishonesty about you. What you're trying to get me to do, by the way, other people who are listening should know this. What Kendall is trying to get me to do is to say something really bad about Howard Stern so I get in trouble. Kendall, you got the brain of a mouse and you got the heart of a frog. Let's move on to another call. Nice try, Kendall, you fucking asshole. Who else do we have? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Did I say that? Oh, I shouldn't say things like that. I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to go to hell now. Mark in Oklahoma, we have.
Yes, my big pet peeve is illegal immigration. I'm a self-employed owner-operator of a semi-truck. My parents also had businesses. And blue-collar, non-union, non-government, the key to look at there is non-union, non-government. Wages have been stagnant for almost 40 years, and I blame that on the onslaught of illegals. 30 to 40 million illegal aliens in our country undercutting our wages who do not care about our country. They send their money home, and they get to retirement. They're planning on running home. And the corporate sluts are lapping it up like a dog over a big bowl of gravy.
You mean, I'm sorry, by that you mean that the people who own businesses are hiring these people, right?
Yeah. And the big corporations wink, wink, nod, nod, look the other way. They know the people aren't citizens, but they pay them $6-7 an hour when they should be paying about 15 to 18.
That's right. They should. They should.
My operating costs of this semi in the last 5 years have gone up 70%, but freight rates have actually fallen. You go out in the western half of this country, and half the drivers at least are from somewhere else, and there's no allegiance to this country, and their skills are minimal at best. They're scared the hell out of me.
Okay. All right. Thanks for calling. Who do we have? Al? Al in Florida. You're on.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
First of all, how dare you curse on satellite radio? What's wrong with you?
I lost control of myself. I'm going to go to the priest right after the show. I have to apologize to my wife. I'm going to have to wipe my mouth out with. Do you have any soap? No soap? In the bathroom? All right. Go ahead. You're on.
Yeah. Anyway, no, we had we got the great Governor Rick Scott down here. He went down to the Frito-Lay plant by me in Orlando, And basically, he's granted them a lot of tax cuts because they're buying new equipment. You know, you figure Frito-Lay, I mean, Frito-Lay's got to be $1 billion company.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it just amazes me, you know, with a company like that they get more tax cuts.
Hey, don't you have? Isn't Florida where that congressman who was trying to, say that the congressman down there in Florida was the guy that said recently got indicted or basically accused of arrested for using cocaine, and he said previously that anybody who was receiving government assistance, like the food, like SNAP, the food stamp program, should have drug testing. And now he gets indicted and arrested for using cocaine, right?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And guess what? He gets to go to rehab. Why some poor person who got arrested for drugs can't go to rehab?
Yeah, he goes to rehab and he's keeping his job in Congress.
I know, it's amazing, man. You know.
Well,
I love that with the drug testing, though, because it's like not one member of the government takes a drug test.
They should all take a drug test. I mean, especially Dianne Feinstein.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Especially Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah.
Dianne Feinstein should take 2 drug tests a day.
Yeah.
On national television.
Oh, absolutely. They should all have 2 term limits and get the hell out.
Yeah.
Between her and Nancy Pelosi, it's just like they're there too long.
I think all the people in Congress. The people in Congress should take televised drug examinations on national television at least once a day. That's what I think.
Hey, absolutely. You need clear thinking people in there, you know. They're the ones who got to make the decisions.
That's right. We got to know that they're straight and they're not high, because right now everything they seem to do is based on what I would call either some kind of like drug or alcohol fueled decision. All right, we're going to move on. Take one more call. All right, who do we have?
All right.
Tony in Wyoming. Can only give you about a minute, Tony, because we're at the end of the show. Go ahead.
Look, hey, I'm really glad I got on with you. I consider myself Republican, but I listen almost 100% of the time to Sirius Left, just driving around.
Uh-huh.
I just question for you. When I was just in my car, and the gentleman was just calling about the thorium and the global warming. Yeah. And this morning, Casper Star Tribune, they had an article where the Justice Department was fining a wind energy company near Casper, Wyoming, $4 million for killing eagles and different birds that are endangered.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the way to go. Why not go to that company and say, what can we do different? Let's do this. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And $4 million. It just seemed asinine to me.
Yeah, that's really crazy. I mean, there has to be some other way they could work that out. There's got to be some other way they could work that out. It's just stupid government bureaucracy. That's all.
Well, Wyoming is windy, and I was driving from...
Listen, I'm sorry, you only got about 30 seconds because we are really at the end of the show. So go ahead.
No, that's good. My only comment was, some areas in Wyoming, they have hundreds of these giant windmills.
Yeah.
And just I was driving, it must have been 40, 50 miles an hour wind. Probably 10% of those windmills are turning.
Mm.
And I don't know a lot of technology.
All right.
That kind of surprised.